for people who might not know who are not Israeli, Channel 12 is like a major news channel in Israel. So these are the three questions. So saying, if an agreement is signed between the current regime and the US, what will your feelings be? That's question number one. Question number two is, if such an agreement is implemented, does it mean that the overthrow and replacement of the regime is out of the question for the foreseeable future? That's question number two. Question number three is, do you trust President Trump to bring about an agreement that will also include the protection and freedom of the Iranian people? By the way, guys, all of these talks about ceasefire, I think, is a lot of people are panicking, and I think they shouldn't. President Trump talked about not hitting the power plant. There was no talk of ceasefire. In fact, he just recently came out and confirmed that there's going to be no ceasefire, and Prime Minister Netanyahu also confirmed that. I mean, it's not, a lot of people forget that Israelis are also in this, and it's not like the Israelis are going to like accept the Islamic Republic getting this close to collapse and then just letting it go and allowing it to rebuild again. It's not like that. That doesn't make any goddamn sense for them to do that, right? Like, so I don't think, like, if you take account to Israelis, it just doesn't make any sense for that to happen. Not only that, the Islamic Republic cannot is in a situation right now that even if it wanted to, it could not accept any surrender right now, because I keep telling people that the Islamic Republic has, for the past 47 years, it built its legitimacy based on the foundation of it being strong, it being resisting and responding strongly to the enemies of Islam, the whole world being afraid of them. All of this, Alpha, we're strong, Durka Durka, the enemies of Islam being afraid of us. That's their entire, like, they created this delusion among their followers that they're supporting something very strong and very powerful that all of the anti-Islamic forces in the world are afraid of. And because of that, they created their own a monster that they have to keep on feeding all the time, or else their entire legitimacy will collapse and they will fall apart. And they basically force themselves into a position where they need to continue feeding that, right? Uh, Especially with Khamenei not being there, because every time they had to basically back down or capitulate, sometimes Khamenei will come out and give a speech to give the justification for it to these people. But without Khamenei, they don't have that anymore. So now this beast is completely, the beast that they all created is completely unleashed and needs to be fed all of this narrative that we're strong and that we will never surrender. So just because of that, the Islamic Republic cannot back down. So, like, if you look at all of the major players, like President Trump, here's what I tell you: like, every time President Trump is telling you that I'm going to be talking to you, you should be very afraid, because every time, like during the 12 Dars, they're like, "Oh, we're going to be talking to the Islamic Republic," and then boom, it hit them. And then right before Operation Epic Fury, we're like, "Oh yeah, we're talking to we're talking to the regime," and then boom, it hit them. So now, like, "Oh, we're going to go back and talk to them." So yeah, that that is the most scariest thing you could hear from President Trump based on the record that he has so far. So I don't know. Like, it seems like he says that he's negotiating with you to buy time for the military assets that need to get to the point where for them to be ready, get there. And remember, the 5 day deadline that he gave now to the Islamic Republic matches the time that it takes for the Marines to show up where they need to show up. So I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen, but again, it's very much repeat of what we saw right before Operation Epic Fury. And the suspicion, by the way, right now is that they're going to go for Kharg Island. I don't know if that's the case or not, but that makes a lot of sense if they do, because a lot of people are like, "Oh, Iran is so big, you can't do a ground invasion of Iran because it's so big and it's so massive and it's so mountainous." You don't need to take Iran. You don't need to go to you don't if you don't need a ground invasion for all of Iran. All you need is Kharg Island. If you take Kharg Island, it's over. Okay, you just need enough military forces, small military forces, to take Kharg Island, and the whole thing will collapse. And it's like a Death Star. There's this one place in Death Star. You don't need to destroy the whole thing. If you just go there, the whole thing will blow up. It's kind of, Khark Island is like that for the Islamic regime. It's like the Achilles heel. 90% of their oil and gas has to go through Khark Island to be sold to I mean, mostly to China. So if you take that, they will completely bankrupt their military operations, and they're not going to be able to continue. So it just seems like it's like a destruction button right there at the south of Iran. You just press and the whole thing will collapse. So it doesn't. To me, I don't know why they wouldn't go for it. All right, and also, but also, just last point before we go through. I know we have limited time, so I should stop talking so we could go through the list. But last point is that the Islamic Republic keeps threatening the Arab countries around the Persian Gulf because their calculation is to get them to stop the Americans from continuing the operations, but it continues to backfire. Especially the UAE and Saudi Arabia are like now begging the Americans to just do regime change completely because their calculation is more long term. Rather, this is not a single. One single, like with game theory, it's not just one game. From the perspective of the Arab countries around the Persian Gulf, is that it's not that okay, let's do ceasefire so that these military operations stop, so that the attacks on our stop. Their understanding is that if we do ceasefire and the Islamic Republic continues, we're going to be back here again at some point, and all of the investment and tourism uh, will coming to this region will have a lot of hesitation coming to this region because it will always be with the assumption that this could happen again. Now that it has happened, there will always be the assumption that it could happen again. So they're like, okay, now that it has started, the only solution is to just get rid of the Islamic Republic completely. So the Islamic Republic calculations is that by attacking these countries, they're going to beg Americans to stop the attacks. It's actually is making them beg the Americans to just make sure that they get rid of the Islamic Republic once and for all. So that strategy is backfiring. Anyways, let's go. Hey, BT is here as well. Fantastic. All right, so I'm gonna stop talking. Sorry, that went long.
Quick question
Okay.
before we move forward. You're short on time. Are we only doing on the list or are we allowing for comments? The list currently is 10 questions.
Wow. Okay, so maybe not. Let's not do comments if it's that big. We could do the guys. We could do the comments in our premium calls today. Let's just try to go through the list because the list is big.
So, very first, I don't know which one, but I have Daniel. I assume Dom.
Yes, that's me. My question is, a couple of days ago, Zelensky met with the prince, and I have my thoughts on it, but I'm curious, Armin, why do you think did they meet? What was the
Well,
reason for them to meet?
okay, so my assumption from let's look at both perspectives, right? So from President Zelensky's perspective, if this is a great opportunity to be useful to for president for the Americans. So it's always good to get on the good side of President Trump. It will benefit you in the long term, right? Getting involved and also talking to Princess of Pahlavi is also makes a lot of sense because we Iranian people and Ukrainian people, we see ourselves on the same side of different these military operations. Just like Putin, Iranian people consider Putin to be their enemy because of his support for the Islamic Republic. But and I also think that President Zelensky sees the Islamic Republic as their enemy, given all of the Shahed drones and other supports that the Islamic Republic has had for Putin. So it makes a lot of sense for us to work with each other and cooperate in our mutual enemies, given that Putin is our enemy and the Islamic Republic is their enemy as well. It makes a lot of sense for us to cooperate and collaborate. From a military perspective, from a political perspective, the Ukrainians getting involved in these military operations, especially given that President Trump is seeing how Europeans are not very supportive when it comes to military operations. That's not going to be good for Zelensky because if the Europeans are not so serious when it comes to helping United States with their enemies, then it's going to demotivate Americans to help the Europeans when it comes to Russia. So Zelensky needs to more directly find ways to get support from Americans by being useful directly rather than through the Europeans, right? From Princess of Pahlavi, there's also the legitimacy benefit here because, as we mentioned, the it doesn't make any sense for Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump to directly support and give legitimacy to Princess of Pahlavi because these we don't want to we want to make sure that the understanding is that the Princess of Pahlavi hasn't been handpicked by the Americans and Israelis, and he's the choice of the Iranian people. However, for other heads of state, there's not going to be that impression. Like people are not going to come with the impression that Ukraine has picked the leader for the Iranian people. So having other heads of state that is not Israel or America meet with and recognize Princess of Pahlavi being the representative of Iranian people really helps with his legitimacy and political capital globally.
Well, thank you. My assumptions were more geographical, but you have
No.
interesting points.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay, next we have Sean.
Hello, I'm
Hi.
here. And so,
Welcome.
sorry, sorry,
Welcome.
my dogs. So,
It's okay.
my mother is a longtime fan of your Persian channel, but I'm new in this community. I'm wondering, why does the IRGC say that everything we found after the people were just a couple of pieces of meat? And now, lastly, you said that in the tunnel that Israel and US struck, they got suffocated. Like, why do they spread these kinds of videos to their own followers? Because for me, I'm the same age as you, Armin, but I grew up in Norway, so I cannot understand their logic. Like, why are they saying these horrible things that are really nice to hear for Iranians in the diaspora because they murder us for so long? But isn't this like affecting the morale for their own people? So they defect more. They even admit that they're defecting, right? So how does this make sense that they say that our own people gave US and Israel the coordinates for the tunnel?
All right. First of all, welcome to the community, and also say hi to your mom and thank her for being a fan. So, to for me to like, let me explain to other people, like, if I and let me know if I understand your question. So, let me give some context. So, we're seeing a lot of videos from the Islamic Republic on state TV inside Iran that, like, oh my like, describing the most horrible ways that the regime forces have died, them turning, like, being torn into pieces, suffocating for hours before they die, and talking about their locations being, somebody from their own forces giving their location and stuff like that for that to happen. So you're saying this, like, from our perspective, like, yeah, we want to know that. That's like, that's amazing. Like, the anti-regime people are like, oh yeah, tell us, please tell us about your suffering. This is therapy for us. Thank you so much for sharing that. But why would they share that? Doesn't that make them look weak and pathetic? And so that's your question, right? Yeah. Okay. So this is because you have to understand the Shia mindset. Okay. So the Shia way of looking at things is always goes back to Karbala, right? So if you Imam Hussein, which is the third Imam of Shias, him being righteous, he's being on the right side of history, him being, the most moral person in the world that suffered and for the sake of Islam, it's always communicated to us in Iran and for 1400 years to Shias is about his suffering, right? His suffering and his hardship shows that he was on the right side of history. And to for us that looks weakness, but for them this shows legitimacy and strength and being right with God and being on the right side of history. So demonstrating your suffering and the suffering of your forces is like a virtue signaling tactic, and it's something that that type of audience is used to, right? So you see them crying, but honestly that crying for the past, for their entire lives is basically one of their hobbies. I know it's hard for people to understand, but they want to cry. Like, they have been trained for this to be something that they want sob stories. They want to hear that their leaders have been killed in the most brutal way. Sometimes they might even exaggerate the level of suffering that they had. So it creates a love, like, for them this is a bonding experience, the same way that they feel love for Hussein because of his suffering. It creates a sense of love for their leaders, the remaining leaders of the regime. It makes them love the regime more because of the suffering that they had to go through, right? So this is what they do. And also talking about people from within that leaked the information, it also goes back to people who betrayed Hussein. It also is an excuse for their weakness. So it's not like they're weak, they're strong, but there's evil people from within us that all of a sudden, even though we're strong, like, it's kind of like Achilles heel, right? Like, we want to make sure, like, that guy is very, very strong, but oh, there was this one thing that ruined everything. So it's not that we're weak. It was like the enemy was like deceiving, and these, they nomadonimi jangan, like it's like they fight in a not honorable way. Like if they were fighting in an honorable way with us, with honor, we would have crushed them. But because they're weak, the way that they defeat us is that they use these immoral tactics to defeat us. So it's also a way to justify why this happened to us, even though we're strong. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but since I'm thinking like in a Western mindset, it doesn't make sense in some way. But your explanation is good, and yeah, but won't this like affect their own troops' morale? That they say that they are sharing the coordinates with the enemy and so on.
So it depends on what percentage of them are full Dorka, right? And what percentage of them are more like. So it's basically the battle between dunya and akhirah. Like the people who are their mindset is more based on worldly, this life issues, and what percentage of them genuinely have been completely consumed by this Shia ideology, right? And nobody really knows that percentage, but their behavior will show what that percentage is. Like, so many of these people who do all of these rituals and ceremonies and say they want martyrdom, they actually don't want martyrdom. They want to live. They're more motivated by the things that me and you are motivated by. But some of them are like, and it's not like black and white, it's like a spectrum. So it depends on what end of the closer to which end of the spectrum that they're in. But yes, there are many people within the regime that see this and they're like, well, I don't want that to happen to me. Like, so yeah, there are a lot of them who are afraid, who are defecting, but again, but even if that's the case, it's not like the people who create that programming are thinking about like what programming that we need to put out there to convince those people. This is just the thing they do. Like, they cannot not do that. This is their factory setting. They need that type of content, and they create that type of content for that type of audience. But you're right, on the other type of people at the from the regime, from the other end of the spectrum, who are more thinking based on pragmatic survival and worldly issues, they hear that and are like, okay, well, I'm out of here then. All right, so it does have that effect.